Well, we could say one sign that the longest off season ever is over is training camp begins league-wide in the Canadian Football League. So I'll talk about that. Also, we'll talk about that. Remember back in the winter a few months ago that the CFL and the XFL were talking about possible partnership? So I'll talk about that in this video. Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel and in my Calgary Stampeders gear, as we're going to talk about the CFL. And actually, we're getting closer to football coming back for the 2021 season as training camps begin league-wide. And I'm definitely going to say this season coming up, I'm going to likely say it's going to be very, very unpredictable based on the fact that, well, because of the pandemic that is still going on, but things are hopefully looking a little better, that there was no football last year, so you can't really quite judge on how teams looked for a season that did not happen last year. But the other thing that you're going to see a lot more of is you're definitely going to see a lot more turnover on the roster, because you have, a year of no football. A lot of players are either, going to be out of shape or decide to retire. There's definitely been a lot of announcements of veterans being retiring, and either you're going to likely see some more veterans being cut. And apparently, I've heard in the Saskatchewan Rough Riders camp on day one of training camp that a lot of players were suffering from Achilles tendons. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how players are going to survive through training camp. And it's going to be 3 weeks, because just under 4 weeks from now, that's when the season is going to begin, the 14-game season. So, yeah, training camp has begun. And here in Calgary, we are hearing once again our fast-talking Texan quarterback, Bo Levi Mitchell. I'm going to say he's definitely excited to be back on the field, not only being the quarterback of the Calgary Stampeders, but the fact that the last time he played, it wasn't a good game. Yeah, it left a bitter taste in my mouth the last time the Calgary Stampeders played over a year and a half ago in the West semifinal. But I've been hearing that Bo Levi Mitchell has been really ramping up, getting healthier, that I think he's actually under 200 pounds. And hopefully, one thing that still sets me back from saying that Bo Levi Mitchell is the best quarterback to ever play for the Calgary Stampeders, I still say it's Doug Flutie. Maybe it's nostalgia, but Doug Flutie, when he's in trouble, he runs and does it all himself. But he was a different kind of quarterback that Bo is. But training camps have begun, so we'll see how things go in the next 3 weeks, and if there's anything major that comes out league-wide, locally, or even around the league that I'm interested in, I'll make follow-up videos on. But I guess that also means that, as I mentioned in my update video, that my Calgary Stampeders this month will return. There'll actually be games to talk about and recap. So what do you think about training camps finally opening? Another sign that's getting closer, that all the players have crossed over and they had their quarantine time. I believe they actually only had 7 days for those that come overseas, and I know slowly they're changing the restrictions so that at least you don't have to quarantine as much once you've been vaccinated. So hopefully, everyone does it as safely as possible, that we hopefully don't have any major outbreaks. But I just want to get back to the game, and that's the one thing that I definitely need to feel like that things are slowly getting back to normal. I mean, yeah, here in Alberta, we're in phase 3 of the open for summer plan, but it's not like a flip of a switch, to be honest with you. Where suddenly it's like, oh, restrictions gone, back. It doesn't work that way. And then the fact that a lot of places that I still go, I still need to wear a mask. So just like a referee with a flag in his back pocket, you're always going to need that mask with you in case if you still need it. So that's that part of the video. That training camp has begun. Another sign that football is coming back, at least on this side of the border here in Canada. And then the second part of the video talk about that apparently the partnership between the Canadian Football League and the Xtreme Football League, the XFL, they're broken off for now. And it might be, I'm going to say for the best right now. I mean, the CFL has been around for over 100 years. Yes, they've had their shaky times, especially, the 80s and the 1990s. And part of that time that I think saved the CFL in the mid-1990s was the U.S. expansion, where they definitely expanded into some markets that I had to first find out where it was in the map. Being a teenager at that time, but it was definitely had some interesting teams. But it still was worth, kicking tires on. You could say it's kind of a free consultation for both leagues. It got both leagues talking in the news. But the thing with the XFL is, well, they only had their one season in 2001 run by Vince McMahon. I mean, he's definitely a lot more successful than a lot of us, being a billionaire running the empire known as the World Wrestling Entertainment. But it didn't succeed in 2001 with its gimmicks and that. And then they couldn't finish the 2020 season because of the pandemic. And once again, the XFL is definitely on that shaky ground where they come in with rah, trying to be the competitor to the National Football League. And I'm going to say the NFL's king, but the XFL also plays after the Super Bowl is played out more as a spring league. And I think the other reason that I think these leagues don't succeed as much, because you also had the USFL, which I think at the time was kind of a competitor to the National Football League, but then that Alliance League. I think it's actually possible to say that, America gets footballed out, if that makes sense. Where you have the National Football League, it starts, in the fall, and goes up until the end of January, early February, the Super Bowl is like, we need a break. It'd be like kind of like our competitor hockey league coming up in Canada, where we love our hockey, but even then we might get hockeyed out. But this league, the only comparison between the XFL and the Alliance or the USFL would be as if we had a hockey league that started, after when the Stanley Cup was awarded, have it in markets where they don't have National Hockey League teams, and maybe put a few in some cities, and then they try to attract talent that's either not in the National Hockey League or in the American Hockey League, or don't play in Europe. That there's options there that I don't think that league would work, especially if it came up with other gimmicks and rules. But going back to, trying to compare why these other spring leagues try to compete in the National Football League doesn't, the NFL's king, but the fact that the XFL, actually now, they're talking about that they're not going to come back to play until 2023. Because earlier this year, it was focusing on coming back in 2022. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing right now, because I think the CFL kind of needs to still try to focus on their own brand rebranding. And I say right now in the CFL, you definitely got the support in Western Canada, let's say here in Calgary, up in Edmonton, definitely in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and even Ontario. I mean, Hamilton definitely has a strong market, and I think Ottawa, now that they finally have some stable ownership, that's where the markets are strongest. But it's the big cities like Vancouver, Toronto especially, and Montreal that they need to work on. And I know the CFL's been focusing on branching out and trying to rebrand more elsewhere in case of the global draft. But I think the XFL, almost needs the CFL more than the CFL needs the XFL, if that makes sense. And it was still worth talking about it. And like I say, kicking tires. It was kind of like a free consultation to, kind of explore. It was kind of a way for both leagues to get in the news. Because if you search about the XFL, CFL partnership, that I call it, you get many sources that come up. I mean, obviously, here in Canada, you got the Sportsnet, TSN, but even ESPN. Those networks down in the U.S. also has talked about that story. But now that the XFL is still on shaky ground, the fact that they failed the first time and waited almost 20 years to come back, and then you still got to wonder, if it wasn't for the pandemic, could they have still probably, limped their way into the championship game? I mean, it still might be something that could still happen down the road. I still say it was worth exploring, but at the same time, not at the expense of everything about the Canadian game and the traditions and the rules. And that was something that was still trying to work on. I know the part of the partnership was the potential that, the other thing I looked at in 2023, that if the XFL were to come back, that they would shift the calendar over, where I think it was from February till the end of April when the season would play. I think now that I saw that we're looking at playing starting in April until the end of July, which kind of is outside the NFL window. And you might still get that blended, part of the partnership is that potentially if you get one player, that the idea is, let's say for example, you have one player that has contractual rights with the XFL team, would also have contractual rights, let's say, with the Calgary Stampeders. And at least that way the player can, collect both, salaries from both those games and then still try to get their foot in the door in the NFL potentially if they're fast go out that way. But I just think right now the CFL definitely has more of a base and tradition than the XFL. I mean, it's two different games to compare to, and yes, there is many players that play football on both sides where they either, they get their showcase here in Canada and then they get picked up in the NFL, or, someone might play it in the NFL first and then not necessarily work out and then come to Canada. It's just two different games. I mean, that's the thing. It's two different games that sometimes one game works over the other, or you have the rare case. I mean, going back to Doug Flutie, he definitely was one of those few players that you could say excelled in both games. I mean, the CFL game definitely played to his strengths and his personality a lot more, but, like say Jeff Garcia as well, another quarterback that because he started here in Calgary and did what he did in Calgary, that launched his career to get success in the NFL. I mean, there's still the potential there that, let's just say, not totally close the door on a CFL XFL partnership or merger, and there was also talk about there was a potential that they would have like a championship game, although there'll be always a gap between either the Grey Cup champion or the XFL champion to play, and then you also got to wonder how would that work, like who would host that game and what rules to play, or maybe be a case of if the game was in Canada, that the XFL team will play Canadian rules, and then maybe the next year, if you have the Grey Cup champion go down the U.S., they play the American rules. It's kind of like the only other analogy would be for hockey, but they play different sizes of rink. I mean, I guess you get that too, but I just think right now it's probably best that the Canadian Football League still work on their internal matters, try to get more healthier markets, and maybe, just maybe, could that Atlantic Schooners dream finally become a reality so we can have a coast-to-coast league. There's definitely support there, but I've been seeing online following groups, and I mean this pandemic also has, put a wrench and everything about trying to get funding for a new arena, or a new stadium. I meant to say not a new arena, because we definitely still been dealing with that here in Calgary with an arena. Even though we're supposed to break ground that, and I'll make a separate video talking about the new event center, but when it comes to public funds and a sports arena, it definitely becomes a controversial topic. So I'll just close up and say, what do you think about the CFL in terms of training camp finally begins? Another sign that the longest off-season ever is about to end. Everyone's back training. Let's hope everyone does it as safe as possible, not have too many injuries because of the long leg of time. And it's going to be interesting to think how many veterans could potentially get cut because of the long time, and how many rookies might spawn up. I still say here in Calgary, we have a chance as long as you have Bo, but we can't necessarily guarantee on that, because I think this year is going to be the most unpredictable season, because you can't really judge it on last season. That didn't happen, and depends how the rosters break out, and then that's the training camp part. And then what about the XFL, CFL partnership, merger, whatever you want to call it, being broken off right now? And I just think, it was worth kicking tires on, talking about it, thinking about it, but I think at this stage, given where both leagues are at, it's probably best that they work on their internal matters first before potentially going back to the table or the field to discuss matters in the future. So anyways, like I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, but I also do a variety of non-sports content, like personal vlogs, attempt at comedy, and I also do share my experiences. I'm on the road or at a sporting event, and I've been doing some logging on the go. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fan journey. You know what you do, just make sure you like and subscribe, and I also have my other social media links down in the description below. For other ways you can follow me. So I just want to say, go Stamps go. Thanks for watching, and as of this recording, it'll be actually 4 weeks tonight, or this afternoon I should say. I'll be back at McMahon's Stadium, in the stands, and I'm going to say, I'm not going to lie, it's probably going to get a little dusty, I think. The same kind of a little dusty when the Calgary Stampeders win the Grey Cup. And then also, one last thing before I close it out. There will not be, not too sure how I'm going to do it this year, there won't be a season ticket unveiling, as tickets are all going to be mobile electronic this year, and then the payment plan was already figured out, so maybe I could still somehow maybe show a season ticket unveiling on my phone and say, hey, here's these tickets. That's probably not going to work, but that's how that's going to work, and that's probably the case with all the other leagues. So I'm going to say, go Stamps go, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.